She felt every eye on her before she felt the weight of the pistol. Her fingers were steady. Her breath was not. Grace Holloway stood in the middle of the general store with her arm raised, the barrel aimed low, not to kill but to warn. The man in front of her laughed once, sharp and ugly, until he saw her eyes. Not fear, not doubt. Resolve. The room had gone silent. Even the floorboards seemed to listen. She had never held a gun 6 weeks ago. Now the whole town waited to see if she would pull the trigger. And all Grace could think was how 3 men had taught her exactly where to aim. 6 weeks earlier, she had still believed obedience was safety. Grace rode west beside her father in a rattling wagon, her spine stiff, her gloved hands folded tight in her lap. Reverend Samuel Holloway sat straight, eyes fixed forward, jaw set like a man who would not be moved again by grief. He had buried her mother in Boston and buried himself soon after. This journey to Iron Ridge was not just a calling, it was an escape. Grace had followed, because that was what good daughters did. By the 3rd day, dust clung to her dress and hair, her back ached. Her prayers felt thin, the driver spoke little, and his rifle never left his reach. Grace learned quickly that faith out here did not replace vigilance. It only walked beside it. They reached a way station at dusk, the kind of place that stood alone because nowhere else would have it. Lamplight spilled through grimy windows. The air smelled of smoke and boiled beans. Grace stepped inside and stopped cold. 3 men stood near the fire. They were tall, all of them, built lean and hard, shoulders broad beneath worn shirts, boots caked with mud and trail dust. They looked alike in a way that went deeper than faces. Same storm-gray eyes, same quiet watchfulness. One bore a scar through his brow. One leaned against the wall, arms crossed, unreadable. The third stood closest to the fire, still as stone. They were not staring, they were assessing. Grace felt it like a touch. The woman who ran the place muttered something about manners and shoved Grace forward. Introductions followed, awkward and brief. The men were the Rowan brothers, Eli, Matthew, and Jonah, ranchers outside Iron Ridge. The preacher's daughter from the east. Polite nods, measured words, something unspoken settling between them like heat. That night, Grace lay awake, listening to their low voices through the wall, calm, controlled, dangerous in a quiet way. Her pulse refused to slow. She told herself it was nerves. It was always nerves. In Iron Ridge, the town watched her from the start. They watched her skirts, her posture, her silence. They watched the way the Rowan brothers lingered too close when they crossed paths. They whispered when Grace began walking with her head higher. They whispered more when she rode out with the brothers at dawn. The first lesson was riding. She failed twice before she mounted the mare properly. Her cheeks burned. Her jaw tightened. She did not quit. Eli corrected her posture with words only. Matthew watched for mistakes. Jonah handed her the reins and said nothing at all. By the time the sun reached its peak, Grace's legs trembled and her hands blistered. She had never felt so alive. They trained her every other day. Riding, shooting, reading the land. Eli taught discipline. Matthew taught patience. Jonah taught instinct. They never touched her more than necessary. Never crossed a line. And yet every lesson carried a tension she could feel in her bones. At night, Grace prayed harder than she ever had. Not for forgiveness, for clarity. The town noticed the change. She no longer hurried when men stared. She met their eyes. She no longer shrank. She stood. The preacher's daughter had learned how to stand. The afternoon it broke, the store was crowded and loud. 3 miners stumbled in, drunk and bold. One blocked her path. His grin was rotten. His words worse. Grace warned him once. He laughed. Her hand went to the pistol Jonah had pressed into her palm days earlier. She drew fast. Clean. just like they taught her. The barrel steadied on his knee. Silence swallowed the room. He moved. Grace backed out into sunlight before her legs gave way. The Rowan brothers were there in seconds, horses rearing, dust flying. Jonah caught her shoulders. Matthew scanned for threats. Eli looked at her like something fierce and fragile all at once. "You did right," Eli said. That night, beneath a wide sky stitched with stars, they told her the truth. About the past they carried. About the lines they would never cross. About the way the town would judge them all. Then Eli spoke the words that changed everything. "We'll train you together," he said, "and we'll protect you, all of us." Grace looked at the three men standing before her, strong, scarred, steady. Her heart already knew the answer. The training changed the shape of her days. It also changed the way the world looked back at her. Grace woke before dawn now, long before the church bell or her father's soft footsteps in the hall. She dressed in older clothes, sleeves rolled, hair pinned tight. The mirror showed a woman she was still learning to recognize. Her eyes were sharper. Her mouth held less apology. When she stepped outside, the air bit her skin, clean and honest, and she welcomed it. The Rowan brothers waited where the cottonwoods thinned near the creek. Eli stood with his hat low, hands easy at his sides. Matthew checked tack with careful attention. Jonah leaned against a fence rail, watching the horizon like it might answer him back. None of them spoke at first. They never rushed words in the morning. Grace mounted without help. It felt like a small victory. They rode hard that day, not reckless, purposeful. Eli set the pace, steady and unforgiving. Matthew corrected her seat when she slipped into old habits. Jonah rode wide, silent, always aware of what lay beyond the rise. When Grace faltered, no one mocked her. When she pushed too far, no one stopped her too soon. Pain became familiar, so did pride. By noon, they broke near a stand of rocks where the wind eased. Grace dismounted on unsteady legs and laughed once, breathless. It surprised her. Matthew passed her water. Jonah tore bread and handed it over. Eli watched her with an expression she couldn't name. "Again tomorrow," Eli said. Grace nodded. "Again." The town did not miss any of it. Whispers followed her like dust. At the pump, at the church door, in the general store, she heard pieces of herself spoken aloud by people who had never asked her name. The preacher's daughter was changing. The preacher's daughter rode with sinners. The preacher's daughter was forgetting her place. Her father noticed too. He did not forbid her. Not yet, but his eyes lingered longer when she came home flushed and sore. He prayed harder at supper. His sermons leaned heavier on obedience, on order, on the dangers of temptation. Grace listened with her hands folded and her heart divided. One evening, as the sun bled low and the town quieted, he spoke. "You've grown distant," he said gently. Grace met his gaze. "I've grown stronger." He flinched. "Just a little. Strength without guidance can lead us astray. Or keep us alive," she said. Silence filled the room. It was not angry. It was afraid. The next lesson was shooting. They trained behind the church where the land dipped and rose. Tin cans on posts, bottles buried in sand. Jonah handed her the pistol and stepped back. Matthew showed her how to breathe. Eli adjusted her stance with a single touch at her shoulder. It sent a quiet shiver through her. She hit the first can, missed the second, hit the third clean through. She did not smile. She simply lowered the gun and waited. Eli nodded once. "Good." That night, Grace lay awake listening to the wind move across the plain. Her muscles ached. Her thoughts would not settle. She thought of hands guiding hers, of eyes that watched without judgment, of the way danger sharpened everything it touched. She also thought of sin. The town decided it had seen enough. It happened on a Sunday. Grace stepped out of church beside her father, the bell still echoing, when a voice cut through the crowd. Loud, drunk, mean. A miner she recognized by his broken nose and reputation. He tipped his hat in mockery and called her something she would not repeat. The laughter that followed was worse. Grace felt the heat rise in her chest. Her father stiffened beside her. She did not look at him. She stepped forward instead. "Say it again," she said. The miner grinned, took a step closer. "Or what?" The Rowan brothers moved without signal. Jonah placed himself just behind her shoulder. Matthew closed the distance, calm and precise. Eli spoke once, low, final, "Leave." The miner laughed. Then he saw their faces. He left. The crowd scattered like it had never been there. That night, Grace rode out alone. She did not tell her father. She did not tell the brothers. She rode until the town lights fell away and the stars took their place. Her chest hurt with too many feelings crowded together. Faith, anger, desire, fear. She stopped at the ridge and let the wind tear through her hair. She was not ready to choose. She heard hoofbeats behind her. All three of them came anyway. Eli dismounted first. Matthew followed. Jonah stayed mounted, watching the dark. "You shouldn't ride alone at night," Eli said. "I needed air," Grace replied. Matthew's voice was softer. "You don't have to carry this by yourself." Grace laughed once, sharp and tired. "Everyone wants something from me. The town, my father, God." She looked at Eli. "What do you want?" The question hung between them. Eli answered slowly. "We want you safe." Quote. Jonah spoke then. "We want you honest." Matthew finished it. "And we want you to choose when you're ready." Grace swallowed. Her heart beat too fast. She looked at the three men who had taught her how to stand, how to aim, how to breathe under pressure. She felt the pull of something dangerous and real. "I don't know what that choice costs yet," she said. Eli held her gaze. "We do." The wind shifted. Somewhere far off a coyote called. Grace turned her horse back toward Iron Ridge, with the brothers riding close, not touching, not leaving. She did not know how long the balance would hold, only that it was already breaking. The town turned colder after that, not with weather, with eyes. Grace felt it everywhere she went. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Smiles faded too quickly. Doors that once opened without pause now hesitated. Iron Ridge had decided something about her, and it did not care whether it was true. Her father felt it too. Reverend Holloway walked with his shoulders heavier now. His sermons grew sharper, his voice carrying warnings instead of comfort. Words like temptation and order and righteousness fell harder from the pulpit. Grace sat in the front pew, hands folded, spine straight, listening to a man who loved her and feared losing her more than he feared God. After church one evening, he finally spoke plainly. "They are dangerous men," he said, closing the door of the parsonage behind them. "Their past follows them, no matter how far they ride from it." Grace removed her gloves slowly. "You don't know them." "I know men," he replied, "and I know what happens to women who stand too close to their fire." She lifted her chin. "They taught me how to survive." His voice cracked. "That is not their place." Grace took a breath. Maybe it should have been. The silence that followed was heavy and aching. Her father turned away first. That night, Grace did not sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind push against the walls. Her thoughts circled the same truths again and again. She was no longer the girl who arrived from the east with clean gloves and quiet obedience. She had learned the weight of a pistol, the strength in her legs, the steadiness in her voice. She had also learned how deeply three men could matter to her. At dawn, she rode out alone. She went farther than usual, past a familiar training ground, past a creek and the cottonwoods. The land opened wide and empty. She pushed her horse harder than she should have, breath burning, heart pounding. She needed distance. She needed silence. She did not see the riders until it was too late. Three men crested the ridge ahead of her. Not the Rowans. Strangers. Their horses were lean and restless. Their faces were wrong, smiling without warmth, watching without respect. Grace slowed, hand drifting toward her side. "Well now," one called, "ain't this a surprise?" She turned her horse to retreat. One of them moved to block her path. Fear snapped sharp and clear through her chest. She reached for the pistol. The shot rang out before she remembered pulling the trigger. Dirt burst near the man's boot. The horse reared. Shouts followed. Another shot cracked. Too close. Grace's horse spun, panicked, bolting sideways. She held on by instinct alone. Then came thunder. Hooves! Shouts. Gunfire. Answering gunfire. The Rowan brothers tore into the space between her and the men like a storm given shape. Jonah rode straight through, firing low and fast. Matthew dismounted and moved with deadly precision. Eli reached Grace first, grabbing her reins, his grip iron and sure. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. She shook her head, breathless, shaking. "No." The strangers fled, fast. Silence returned slowly, broken only by Grace's ragged breathing. Eli swung down from his horse and pulled her close without asking. She did not resist. Her hands fisted in his coat as the fear finally caught up with her. Matthew stood guard. Jonah scanned the horizon until he was sure they were alone. "You should not have been alone," Eli said, voice rough. "I needed space," she whispered. "You could have been killed." "So could anyone," she replied. Then her voice broke. "I didn't want you choosing for me." Quote. Eli pulled back enough to look at her. His eyes were fierce and conflicted. "We never wanted to cage you." "I know," she said. "That's why this is so hard." They rode back in silence. The town already knew by the time they returned. Someone had seen the shots. Someone always saw enough. By nightfall, the story had twisted. Grace had ridden out with armed men. Grace had invited trouble. Grace had crossed a line no preacher's daughter should cross. Her father waited for her at the door. He did not shout. That frightened her more. "You could have died," he said quietly. She met his gaze. "I almost did." His shoulders sagged. "I brought you here to save you." "You brought me here to survive," Grace said. "And I am." He looked at her then, truly looked, at the dust on her skirt, the steadiness in her eyes, the strength she no longer hid. "I don't recognize you," he whispered. Grace stepped closer. "Then see me now." The next day the town made its move. 3 men waited outside the general store, same miners. Sober this time. Meaner. They blocked Grace's path as she came for supplies. Their voices carried. People watched from doorways. No one intervened. "You think you're something special now?" one sneered. Grace stopped. Her hand hovered near her pocket. "Move," she said. They laughed. Then the Rowan brothers appeared. They did not rush. They did not shout. They simply stood behind her, a wall of quiet certainty. The laughter died. "This ends," Eli said. The miners scoffed. "Or what?" Grace stepped forward before Eli could answer. She drew the pistol, clean, steady, the barrel aimed low, exactly where it should. "Or this," she said. The town went silent. The miner saw something in her face that changed his mind. He stepped aside, slowly. Grace backed away, never lowering the gun until she reached open space. Her knees shook once she was clear. Eli caught her before she fell. That night, under a sky heavy with stars, Grace stood between the 3 men. "I can't keep standing in the middle," she said. "The town, my father, you." Jonah nodded. "We knew this day would come." Matthew's voice was calm. "Whatever you choose, it has to be yours." Eli looked at her, pain and devotion warring in his eyes. "We won't force you." Grace took a long breath. "I'm done being afraid," she said. The words settled between them, heavy and final. The choice did not come with peace. It came with weight. Grace felt it the moment she spoke the words. The night seemed to lean closer, the stars pressing down, as if waiting to see whether she would bend. The Rowan brothers did not rush her. They never did. They stood with her in the quiet, letting the truth settle where it belonged. "I'm done being afraid," she repeated, softer now. Eli nodded once. Matthew let out a slow breath. Jonah looked away toward the dark hills, jaw tight. They all understood what those words meant. Not just for her. For them. "You should talk to your father," Matthew said. Grace swallowed. I will. They did not follow her back to town that night. That was their respect, or their restraint. She was not sure which hurt more. The parsonage felt smaller than ever. Her father sat at the table with a single lamp lit, Bible closed but never far from his hand. He looked up when she entered, relief flashing before worry reclaimed it. Grace stood across from him, dusty, tired, steady. You were almost killed, he said. Yes. You keep placing yourself in danger. No, Grace replied gently. I keep learning how to face it. He rubbed a hand over his face. Those men will destroy you. She shook her head. They saved me. That is not love, he insisted. It is temptation disguised as protection. Grace stepped closer. You taught me to look at what people do, not what others say about them. They stood when no one else did. They taught me without asking anything in return. His voice trembled. They want you. Yes. Grace, he whispered, that is not God's way. She knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. Father, I don't believe God lives only in rules. I believe he lives in truth, and this is mine. He closed his eyes. For a long moment he did not speak. I brought you west to keep you, he said. After your mother died, you were all I had left. Quote. Her chest tightened. You didn't lose me when we came here. You're losing the girl I was, not the woman I am. He looked at her then, really looked, at the strength in her shoulders, the calm in her voice, the resolve that did not waver. When did you stop needing me? He asked. Grace smiled sadly. I still need you, just not to decide for me. Tears filled his eyes. He turned away, ashamed of them, then back again. If you walk this path, people will judge you. They already do. And the church? Quote, I will always carry what you taught me, Grace said. Kindness, mercy, faith, but I won't live my life in fear of whispers. He sagged in his chair, suddenly older than she remembered. I don't know how to bless this, he said. She squeezed his hands. Then don't bless it as a preacher. He looked up. And as my father? A long silence followed. The lamp flickered. Finally he nodded. As your father, I will not stand in your way. Grace leaned forward and held him as he broke quietly against her shoulder. The town did not offer the same grace. By morning the rumors were louder, uglier. The miners gathered again, this time with others emboldened by drink and righteousness. Words like sinner and ruin followed Grace wherever she walked. She kept her head high, her steps steady. The Rowans met her at the edge of town. You don't have to face this alone, Eli said. I know, she replied, but I have to walk into it myself. They walked with her anyway. The confrontation came in the open, where everyone could see. Near the church, near the store, men spoke. Voices rose. Accusations flew like stones. Grace did not shout back. She did not cry. She spoke once. I belong to myself, she said, and I choose who stands beside me. The Rowan brothers stepped forward as one. Eli's voice carried. We won't hide. Matthew added, calm and firm. We won't apologize for protecting what matters. Jonah finished it. And we won't let her stand alone. The crowd wavered, not convinced, but no longer certain. That night, Grace packed her things, not everything, just what she needed. When she stepped onto the porch, her father stood waiting. He handed her a small Bible, worn soft at the edges. For when you need grounding, he said. She hugged him tight. For when I need remembering. She rode out under a pale moon, the Rowans flanking her, not leading, not following, beside. Ahead lay the ranch, the unknown. A life no one had promised would be easy. Grace felt fear stir once more, then fade. She had chosen. The ranch rose from the land like it belonged there. Not grand, not gentle. Honest. Grace took it in as they rode closer. Weathered fences. A low house built strong against wind and winter. The mountains stood watch behind it, dark and steady. This was not a place made for pretending. It was made for work, for survival, For truth. She felt her nerves tighten anyway. The Rowan brothers did not speak as they dismounted. They moved with familiar ease, each taking care of small tasks without thinking. Matthew checked the horses. Jonah scanned the ridge out of habit. Eli turned to Grace last. "This is where we live," he said. "There are no promises here except the ones we keep." Grace nodded. "That's all I want." The first days were quiet, not easy, quiet. Grace learned the rhythms of the ranch the way she had learned to ride and shoot. Slowly. With mistakes. With bruises she didn't complain about. She learned how to mend a fence and start a stubborn fire. She learned how silence could mean comfort instead of distance. At night, they sat together on the porch, the stars thick overhead. No touching. No crossing lines. The tension between them was real, but so was the restraint. It told her everything she needed to know. They respected her choice because it was hers. The town did not come for her right away. Judgment lingered at the edges instead. Whispers rode the wind. But Iron Ridge had short attention for things that didn't break quickly. When nothing scandalous happened, when Grace did not fall apart or crawl back begging forgiveness, the town's hunger dulled. Time did what shouting never could. Weeks passed. Grace grew stronger, more sure. She laughed more than she had in years. She argued with Jonah over fence lines. She prayed alone at sunrise. She listened when Matthew spoke quietly about the past they never named outright. She watched Eli carry leadership like a weight he had chosen and would never set down. Love did not arrive all at once. It settled. One evening, after a long day repairing storm damage, Grace stood at the edge of the field watching the sky burn orange. Eli joined her, close enough to feel his warmth, not close enough to assume. "You can still leave," he said, "any day." She smiled. "I know." He hesitated. "We won't ask for more than you're ready to give." Grace turned to face him. Her voice was steady. "I'm ready." The words changed the air between them. They did not rush. They gathered together, under the open sky, 3 men and 1 woman, bound by a truth they no longer feared. No grand declarations. No vows spoken aloud yet. Just hands finding hands, foreheads touching, breaths shared. Grace felt whole. When the wedding came, it was small. Autumn had turned the mountains gold. The wind carried pine and promise. A handful of ranch hands stood nearby. Widow Keller from the way station watched with soft eyes. At the back, her father stood alone, hat in his hands. He did not wear his collar. He did not speak as a preacher. But when Grace met his gaze, he nodded once. Proud, sad, loving. That was blessing enough. The vows were simple. Matthew promised steadiness. Jonah promised laughter when the world turned hard. Eli promised devotion that would not bend when tested. Grace promised truth, presence, love without fear. When it was done, the wind rose like applause. Life did not soften after that. Winter came hard. Work was relentless. There were arguments and long nights and moments when the world reminded them they were different. Grace faced it all, standing tall, never shrinking back into who she had been. She was no longer the girl from the East. She was a woman of the land, of choice, of courage. On quiet nights, she stood on the porch with 3 strong presences at her back and listened to the coyotes call. The sound no longer frightened her. It sounded like freedom. And when dawn came, cold and bright, Grace Holloway stepped into it without regret, held by a love that had been chosen, earned, and fiercely kept.